Today, we're talking about how you can use debt to grow your wealth. So, I want to break down the power of debt, plus the other 6 pillars of real estate. Welcome back to the Rich Dad Radio Show, where we teach you the good news and the bad news about money. I'm your host, Jaren Sustar, and today I want to talk to you about how debt can make you rich. I don't know what you guys think of when you hear the word debt, but for me, I think my initial thought tends to be taboo, like debt is bad. We've associated with debt and bad, but that may not always be the case. And when I think about where does that association come from, where do we automatically hear the word debt and think bad? I think it goes back to the middle class. A lot of us grow up middle class, myself included. And what does the middle class preach? Save your money and stay out of debt. Save your money, stay out of debt. Well, they tend to do neither. They don't save any money. They definitely don't invest. And they just go and continue to get into debt. A lot of times when they're getting into debt, tell me if you guys know anybody like this. It's an impulse buy. It's, I deserve X. I've been working so long at my age, I can go buy blank. Or they get so bored, they're so mundane in their life that they just need another dopamine hit. And so maybe they'll go out and buy a car, a piece of furniture, something expensive under debt, and it makes them feel good for a couple of weeks. And then they're back to baseline, their mundane life, no wealth, no purpose, and they're on the search for the next high, never accumulating what they want to set out to do. So what is debt when we look at the definition? So it is the state of owing money. And again, society has deemed it a bad word or a bad term, but there's good debt and there's bad debt. So we focus on the bad debt a lot, but there is an opportunity to use debt to completely change your life and make you unbelievably wealthy. Good debt can change your life. Bad debt can ruin you. So let's talk about both of them. I want to talk about bad debt first. What are some of the things that fall into bad debt? We'll pop through this and then we'll get into how can we use good debt to make us wealthy. So bad debt are liabilities, right? So we have income that comes in and then we accumulate these liabilities or bad debt that we have to take our income and they become expenses. This debt becomes expenses that we have to pay and it takes our money away. And so when we look at what are some of the big ones that we face in our world, well, number one is credit card debts. So I think there's over 1.1 trillion worth of credit card debt in the United States. And just for the record, you're not going to get rich off of the points that you get from credit cards. The credit card company is going to win. So if you're going to use credit cards to buy bad consumer products, you're going to lose every time. Payday loans. There's over $33 billion worth of payday loans in the U.S. And that's just where somebody loans you usually $500 or less to help you make it to the next payday. You got student loans, over $1.7 trillion. Okay. General degrees put you behind the 8 ball. You do not have to have a college degree to be wealthy. Do you need one to get into a specific field sometimes? Absolutely. But for the average person, you can go out and create that life of your dreams, build wealth without getting into $20, $30, $40, $100,000 worth of debt. We look at retail cards, $118 billion. Don't get me started on this one. Spending money at TJ Maxx, Lululemon, whatever your store of choice is, that is one of the most idiotic things that you can do to get into debt. And then we look at vehicle loans, over 1.6 trillion worth of vehicle loans in the US. And you're pretty much just buying a car to impress people that you don't even like and they don't even like you. So oftentimes vehicle loans are a waste of money and vehicles tend to go down in value. So what's the answer? Stop buying liabilities with other people's money. Stop buying liabilities with other people's money. They cost you money, they have no appreciation, and there is no further value to gain when we purchase these liabilities. Our goal should be to limit the number of liabilities we have because they're going to be negative to our financial health. You guys will hear me say this over and over again. Liabilities, consumer debt, bad debt is almost like quicksand to any person trying to achieve financial freedom. Because if you're consumed with liabilities, if you're consumed with bad debt, you're going to be trying to climb out of that hole to reach financial freedom, to start buying assets, to start doing the right things with your money. But at all times, those liabilities and that bad consumer debt is going to keep pulling you backwards and keeping you from going and achieving the life of your dreams and those goals that you've set out financially for yourself. So does that mean that we should shy away from all debt? Absolutely not. We just have to turn our eyes from bad debt, from what society, what the norm is, and say, okay, not all debt is bad. where should I go leverage other people's money that is going to make me wealthy? And when I look at the thing that has made the most people wealthy over time through leverage, it's done it for myself and my family, it's real estate. Okay, now why is real estate good debt compared to all those other items that I just talked about? Well, number one, you get cash flow with real estate. So you're going to have money going into your pocket. Number two, you get appreciation. It goes up in value over time. So we use somebody else's money, buy this piece of real estate, cash flow is coming into our pocket every month while the property is going up in value. Now, for example, if we were to buy a piece of furniture using a credit card, that piece of furniture isn't going to make us any monthly income through cash flow, nor is it going to go up in value over time. So that is an example of bad debt, but that rental property that we just talked about is going to pay you monthly and is going to go up in value over time. Okay, so think about why good debt is so powerful, especially when used to buy real estate, Imagine you want to go buy $100,000 worth of Apple stock. What are you going to have to come up with to buy $100,000 worth of Apple stock? You're going to have to come up with $100,000. But if you want to go buy a piece of real estate today as a no-vice investor, as a personal home buyer, at most, usually all you're going to have to come up with is 20%. Then there's programs where you only have to put 10% down of that 100,000. Then there's programs where you only have to put 5% as a down payment for a $100,000 house. Then there's programs for 3.5% down to buy those $100,000 houses. And then there's programs like the VA where you got no money down. And then there's ways investors buy properties where they use totally other people's money to completely buy deals and rehab deals. And they're able to build these huge portfolios without putting any or very little of their own money in. So the point is we can spend very little or none of our own money, leverage other people's, and control a very expensive asset, sometimes 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. And as you start growing and building in the investor space, we can get into the millions. So I want to give you guys an example of a deal that I'm personally working on right now and how we're using debt to absolutely crush this deal and get fantastic returns. So we usually buy properties that are ugly, make them pretty, fix them up, and either rent them out or flip them. But there's an opportunity for new builds in our area right now. So we've been on the hunt for some property, and we found a 3-acre lot that we were able to purchase for $45,000. Perk test to see where we can build a home is going to cost us about $2,000. Survey is around $2,000. Then our closing costs are around $2,000. So that puts us all in cash at $51,000. So we got to come out of pocket $51,000. The bank is then going to give us a 100% finance loan for all the construction. So the construction on the home to build the home from the ground up is going to be $216,000. The bank is going to lend me all of that. When we get done, that property is going to be worth $380,000. So I am going to put in $51,000. That's all the capital we have to come up with, and then make around $113,000. So it's going to be worth $380. Subtract the $216 plus $50 we're in. We're going to make around $113,000. That is a 45% cash on cash return. 45% cash on cash return. You know what the stock market average return is? I think it's 8 to 10% over the last, 50 or 100 years. So if I gave you a machine, all right, pretend there's this money machine, and I said for every $5 you put in, it's going to give you 10 back. Would you not run and find as many $5 bills as you possibly could? That's what real estate is like when you learn to use debt to buy it. You know, I remember the first 2 deals that I purchased back in 2018. They were fantastic deals, but we had to put 20% down, right? And then we had to fund the rehab out of our own pocket. Not that we had to, that's the only way I knew how to buy real estate at the time. And so by the time we bought these 2 properties with 20% down and then fixed them up using our own money, we're all in at $50,000 or $60,000. And at the time, that's all I had. And so I had essentially just handcuffed myself for future growth, or at least I thought, by utilizing my own capital. But then I started taking debt a step further. And I want to stop and say 2 properties is great. So if you're at that point, great. Now I want to help you get over the hump, because I've been there to where it's like, man, I feel really good about myself, but how do I continue this? And so we took debt a step further to where we started raising people's money to buy our deals and also fund our rehab. So we weren't having to come up with our capital for each deal because we all have a finite amount of capital. So we need to pool other people's in. And so we bought 2 properties in 2018. After we learned how to use other people's money, we bought 19 additional properties all in 2019. And by the end of 2019, we had 21 units in our portfolio, had done a number of flips, and we were only 28 years old. And so this can be done. It works. And debt is the most powerful force that can help you when buying real estate. And I don't have time to talk about how we use debt exactly to scale into all 19 of those properties in 2019, but I talked about it on the last episode. So go back and watch it when you get a chance. So when I talk about debt, debt is not the only powerful force when it comes to buying real estate. I think it's debt mixed with 5 other pillars. So I say there's 6 huge pillars in real estate that when combined are the greatest concoction, the greatest financial concoction known to man. So the one that we're talking about this episode, debt, that is where we are able to use other people's money to control a very expensive asset that's going to go up in value while paying us cash flow every month. The second pillar is forced appreciation. So forced appreciation is simply this. It's a fancy word for saying I can buy something ugly, I can make it pretty, and immediately it's worth more. So we can go buy a home that's in very bad shape. We can put new floors in it, paint the outside, give it good landscape, update the kitchen, update the bathrooms, update the master bedrooms, put it for sale, or we don't even have to put it for sale. We can just get it reappraised, and it's going to be worth more because we forced that appreciation through the rehab. Very hard to do that when you're owning stock or companies that you don't get to control. Third is we get appreciation. So based on historical data, real estate goes up over time. And so we know that we can buy this asset, let time go by, and based on what it's done since the beginning of time, it's going to continue to go up in value. While it's going up in value, while we're forcing that value through forced appreciation, we're going to have tenants that are staying in our homes that are then paying down the debt. So we use debt to buy it. Now tenants are going to pay that debt down for us. It's not like your personal home where you have to pay the mortgage every month. We're going to have tenants come in, pay that mortgage every month, and then what's left over after we pay the mortgage and all our expenses leaves us with number 5, cash flow. Every month, we take that rent check, pay our expenses, all the excess goes to us. That's a huge part of what makes real estate a strong asset that you can use debt to leverage and keeps it from being a liability like so many different other objects. And then we have tax benefits, which is one of my favorites, and I'm excited to dive in more on tax benefits as we progress with the Rich Dad Real Estate Show. But you get depreciation. So although the property is going up in value, we can depreciate it for tax purposes, and there's tax benefits there. We can get tax write-offs, and then we get benefits on the sale, such as a 1031 exchange, or when we do a refinance, all of which we will talk about earlier. Add it up, it's the greatest concoction known to man. We'll be right back.
Are you worried about your financial security in these unprecedented times? If you are, the next minute could profoundly impact your financial security. Imagine waking up to find the economy has plunged and your portfolio has plummeted 30 to 45%, while banks are in turmoil, holding your money hostage while waiting for FDIC intervention. Where would you turn? For many, this may sound like fiction, but it's a stark reality for those that have money on the line. Recently, America's awoke to both the NASDAQ and the Dow, plummeting over 1,100 points each and triggering a frenzy of sell-offs. History shows us how a single event can crash the market, like the dot-com bubble of 1999, the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008, and the pandemic of 2020. But today, we're facing multiple bubbles: commercial real estate, stock, bonds, and banks. Combined with the relentless inflation, the threat of global recession, the specters of war, and you have the perfect storm. The consequences could be catastrophic, plunging us into unprecedented crisis. America is sliding in the age of discord, with trust in institutions collapsing and the democratic norms unraveling. The quality of life for Americans has declined. Wealth is concentrated among the rich, while the median American family income stagnates, creating a dangerously top-heavy social pyramid. Moreover, hostile countries like Russia, China, and Iran are working to destroy the U.S. dollar. Gold is a no-matter-what store of wealth that you need. That's why Robert has been such an advocate of gold, and he trusts Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold is ready to help you incorporate physical gold as part of your portfolio and protect it against economic uncertainty. Visit protectwithrobert.com today to learn how you can qualify for up to $5,000 in free silver with a qualifying investment. Or give them a call at 844-3-ROBERT. Remember to mention Robert and Kim sent you when you contact Allegiance Gold. Secure your IRA or 401k today with Allegiance Gold. Visit protectwithrobert.com or call 844-3-ROBERT.
Welcome back to the Rich Dad Real Estate Show, where we talk about the good news and bad news of real estate. I'm your host, Jaren Sustar, and today we're talking about how you can use debt to grow your wealth. So I want to break down the power of debt, plus the other 6 pillars of real estate that we talked about before the break when accumulating rental properties. And then also we want to talk about the opportunity costs you face if you do not utilize real estate and debt to build wealth. So here's our example. Let's pretend that we have $100,000 in cash to spend. All right. We can either buy 1 rental property, all cash, or we can buy 5 rental properties using $100,000, doing 20% down, which is going to allow us to purchase around $500,000 worth of real estate, because we're going to need $100,000 down to get to $500,000 worth of real estate. So 1 rental in cash, 5 rentals using debt. Okay, we're going to play this scenario out over a 20-year time span where we gain $100K in equity in each property over a 20-year span. Now, that seems pretty small to me too, 20 years to gain $100K in equity, but I was educated in South Carolina. So we're going to try to keep it simple today to go through this scenario. All right, so let's look at equity first, and then we'll take a peek at cash flow, cash on cash returns after that. So let's look at the example of 1 rental that you purchased. You have $100,000, you used all $100,000 to buy this rental in cash. All right, so after 20 years, you added $100K equity into your home. So the home's now worth $200,000, but it took you 20 years to gain back in equity what you put into the property. And you had to put $100,000 in to get a little over, which we'll talk about in a second, 100,000 back. So you would have made another 168,000 bucks in cash flow, which we'll talk about here in a second. So I don't want to get too in the weeds. So 100,000 of that cash flow you made would have paid back your initial investment. And so then you would have had 68,000 left over in cash flow you've accumulated before talking about expenses, plus the $100,000 you gain in equity. But for 20 years, all that capital's been gone. You lost that 100K, 20 years. And so there's a huge opportunity cost to doing that. And you only have 1 property to show. We have to look and say, what could that money have been used for over the last 20 years to get better returns? That's why the middle class stays middle class, because they don't understand opportunity costs. They just say, they hear debt is bad. Don't use debt. All debt is bad. Although that's not true. So then they may even dabble in real estate, but they go and they buy a rental property, all cash, and the returns are ridiculously minimal. All that cash is tied up, and they're missing out on so many benefits and wealth building tools that they could be leveraging over time, just because they hear the word debt and they want to stay away from it. Check this out. If we buy 5 rentals using our debt, okay, we got $100,000 to start. We put 20% down on each of those properties. So it's allowed us to buy 5 properties worth a total of 500,000 bucks. Because we have 5 homes that all appreciated $100K in value over 20 years, we now have $1 million worth of home values. $1 million compared to $200,000 when we bought the 1 rental in cash. So 1 rental in cash is now worth $200,000 after 20 years. These 5 rental properties that we purchased using debt, because we did 20% down for 5 instead of all cash for 1, are now combined worth $1 million. Our tenants have now paid off that $400,000 mortgage that we started with. So we have no debt now at the end of 20 years on our properties, because our tenants have paid them off for us. And so you put $100,000 in and you got $1 million back in equity. That gives us a 1,000% ROI, 12.16 annualized return on equity. And that doesn't even factor in cash flow, which we'll talk about in a second. Let's go back to that money printing machine analogy that I used earlier. If I give you 2 machines side by side and you take $1, put it in and get $1 back, or I give you another machine and you put $1 in and you get $10 back, which one are you taking? Guys, this is common sense. This is common sense that has been clouded by the fear and the propaganda and the narrative of the status quo. And we have got to change that mindset, remove emotion from the picture, and look at the math, look at the numbers, look at logic. So now let's take a peek at the cash on cash returns. What does it look like? How much we've put in versus what we're getting back on the cash that's coming in annually. So on the one rental that we purchase in cash, let's just say for all these properties, we're getting $1,000 a month in rent. The one rental that was paid for in cash, you're going to have around $700 a month in cash flow after expenses, taxes, and insurance. That gives us around $8,400 a year in cash flow. Take that $8,400 in cash flow per year, divide that by the $100,000 that you invested, and that's about an 8.5% cash on cash return. Then if we look at the 5 rentals that we purchased with debt, we've got $1,000 a month coming in for rent for each of those 5 rentals. But because of the debt, having to pay the mortgage, we're only making about $200 a month in cash flow. So that puts us at $2,400 per year that we're bringing in per property on the 5 that we use debt. And for each of those 5, we only put $20,000 down as a down payment. So then when we take that $2,400 that we're bringing in every year, divide it by the $20,000 that we've got invested into the property, then that gives us a cash on cash return of 12%. Look, so many novice investors and clueless folks who have no idea what they're doing in the real estate space strictly look at the dollar amount of cash flow per month without actually looking at what the numbers are saying. If we were to look at the cash flow numbers, the one property that we bought with cash is bringing in roughly $700 a month. The one of them with debt's bringing in $200 a month. We'd be like, that's a no-brainer. This one makes $500 more cash flow per month. But we're missing and forgetting all of the other data that goes into it, while also not even looking at the actual cash on cash returns. Because the cash flow number is bigger doesn't mean it's better returns. And so we're actually getting better returns on the properties that we use debt to buy. Plus we're getting all the other benefits that are coming with the leverage because we were able to buy 4 additional properties compared to tying all of our capital into one. And so it's a big picture that we have to look at. We can't get hung up on one metric of cash flow or return on equity or ROI. That is a big picture that when debt is involved, we can help ourselves create the best returns possible in real estate deals to grow our portfolios to help us achieve financial freedom. So do we want to maximize something like cash flow? Of course we do. Okay, but we don't want to do any of those things at the expense of our purchasing power, especially when we can get better cash on cash returns. Is this making sense to you guys? Look, let's take it a step farther, okay? Let's say that the 20 years has gone by, and we could run this scenario 10 years in, 7 years in, 15 years, but let's just pretend the 20 years has gone by and we have all of that equity in those 5 properties that we bought, okay? Most people would say, well, that's just paper money, but I tend to disagree. Here is why, because we can do 3 different things to access that equity that is going to build wealth in our lives. Number 1 is we can sell it, take the profits, and pay our taxes. So if you sell the property and you've owned it for over a year, you're going to pay capital gains, but it's going to be capped at long-term capital gains, which I think at the time of this recording is somewhere around 20%. You're capped at paying 20% at long-term capital gains. Number 2, we could sell it and do what's called a 1031 exchange. So a 1031 exchange is essentially a tax break. You can sell a property held for business or investment purposes and swap it for a new one of like kind that you purchased with the same purpose, allowing you to defer the capital gains tax on that sale. So you can sell a property, buy another one, defer paying the capital gains on the one you just sold, and you can continue doing this over and over. And there's really no limit on how many times you can do a 1031 exchange. Or number 3, we could refinance that property or put a HELOC on the property. So if we look at the 5 rentals that we bought in this scenario, they're worth $1 million after 20 years and we have no debt on them. There are banks out there that will lend you somewhere between 70 to 80% LTV. So whatever your properties are worth, which in our scenario, they're worth $1 million, a bank may say, I will allow you to do a cash out refinance of 80% of that new appraised value of $1 million and we'll write you a check for $800,000, because $800,000 would be 80% of $1 million in equity. You have that. Now you have a loan of $800,000. In theory, your rents have gone up. So your rents from that property are still paying for the new mortgage, plus giving you cash flow, all while you've been able to take $800,000 and put it in your bank account. And the beautiful thing about lines of credits, about refinances, is the government does not tax those because they look at it as debt and they do not tax debt. And so now we start building ourselves this huge wealth building machine as our portfolio grows, because we have these properties under our umbrella that we can just keep pulling from over the years, and we're adding new ones to the portfolio, and they're building equity, and then we're going to pull that equity out as rents go up over time and values go up over time, still getting cash flow, but pulling the equity out, not paying taxes on that equity. And we can do this over and over and over and over. And so you start to see what the power of debt can do if used correctly with an asset while staying away from liabilities. Look, the bottom line is you are going to destroy your purchasing power by buying real estate in all cash. You're going to destroy your financial future by using debt to buy liabilities. Okay. Debt is arguably the most powerful financial tool on the planet, maybe only second to compound interest. So go use it wisely and build financial freedom through real estate. Now it's time for questions for Jaren. This one is one of my favorites and it gets me on a soapbox. Here's the question. I am hesitant to buy real estate because of the classic 2 a.m. toilet clog call. How do I get over that? Oh my goodness. You want to get me fired up? Ask me that question. Listen, the only people who walk around saying, I don't buy real estate because I don't want to deal with a clogged toilet call at 2 a.m. are broke people who do not own real estate. Plain and simple. Investors who already own real estate, who are making money, who are building wealth, they're growing their capital gains, their appreciation, they're getting cash flow every month. They don't even know about the call at 2 a.m. Why? Because real investors aren't landlords. We are investors, and we pay people to handle things like that so that we can focus on finding the next deal, funding the next deal, networking, building the portfolio, whatever the case may be, anything but getting bogged down by the day-to-day. That's what real investors are doing. So I would encourage you, if that's holding you back and you're scared to buy real estate because of that classic example, throw it out the window. It's garbage. I've been doing this for a very long time, coming up on a decade, and I have never gotten a call at 2 a.m. about a clogged toilet. If you do, you've got your system set up wrong. And the good thing is we can tweak that and you'll never get another call again. All right, question number 2. Can you only buy so many properties before the bank won't lend to you? That is a fantastic question that a lot of people get hung up on. You can only buy so many properties under your personal name because you're going to run into what's called the debt to income ratio. So the amount of debt that you have compared to your personal income is eventually going to reach a limit, and they're not going to lend to you anymore. Banks are going to lend to you anymore. They'll be like, you got too much debt for the income you have. So what do? You just don't buy real estate anymore? Not so fast. Here is the key. And here's how folks like myself and thousands or tens of hundreds of thousands, millions all over the world who invest in real estate continue to scale without capping their debt to income ratio. They buy under what's called commercial loans or DSCR loans. And so essentially, you are going to start buying underneath, usually in a corporation, a lot of times an LLC, and they are going to lend to you oftentimes based on how the property is going to perform more so than what your personal finances look like. And so then when you go and you get these commercial loans or you get these DSCR loans, also known as debt service coverage ratio loans, they do not affect your personal debt to income ratios. If they were to pull your credit after you have a commercial loan, DSCR loan, it's not going to show in your credit report like your personal home would. Instead, lenders are going to ask for your rent roll, where you're going to be able to show them the properties you own, the debt you have on it, what the properties are worth, what's coming in. They're going to look and see what those debt coverage ratio are. How much do you own? How much do you owe? What's the payment every month versus what's coming in and what the property is worth? And that's how you're going to be able to break through that issue. It's very easy to do, but it's unknown to a lot of novice investors, and hopefully that'll help you moving forward. Thank you for tuning into the episode today where I talked about how you can utilize debt, one of the most powerful wealth building tools in the world, to grow your real estate portfolio, which in turn is going to allow you to reach financial freedom. I'm your host, Jaren Sustar. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Rich Dad Real Estate Show. Again, I'm your new host, Jaren Sustar. I look forward to hanging out with you guys every week. Make sure you keep tuning in so we can deep dive into all things real estate investing. You can take this knowledge, go apply it into the world so you can ultimately reach financial freedom. I'll see you next week.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.